move along to this featured bout of the evening. And I got to say, this is just an above average UFC card at the Apex, right? They've kind of turned in some pretty shitty cards at the Apex over recent years. But let's take a look at this card on Tapology. So let's close out our advertisements and all that nonsense. But if you look right here, guys, Gilbert Burns and Sean Brady, for me, that's a good fight. That's a very solid fight. It's a meaningful fight. Stakes in the welterweight division. This is a serious fight. Then you look at the Jessica Andrade and Natalia Silva fight. That has stakes. This matters for a division. These are fighters that actually matter. That's important to me. I like to see that. Then you look at Kyle Nelson and Steve Garcia. Is it, blow your hair back, casual fan intrigue? No, it's not. But are these two guys that have kind of earned, pretty solid steps up? Yeah, I mean, Steve Garcia keeps knocking fools silly, right? Going out there, putting it all on the line in crazy slugfest, and he keeps coming out on top, winning those fights. And when he needs to, when he gets clipped, when he gets hurt, he takes the guy down, gets to the top position, and beats the tar out of him. I mean, this guy, Steve Garcia, has shown he's one of the most violent SOBs in the division. On the other side of the equation, you got a Kyle Nelson who's shown not only does he have power in his elbows, not only does he have power in his punches, not only is he willing to get up there and mix it up in the clinch, throwing big knees to the body, right? Then I see a guy, that's going to go out there and look for, an early knockout, right? And Steve Garcia basically welcomes that kind of fight. He's like, hey, you want to go for an early knockout? I want to go for an early knockout. Let's get in there and car crash and figure out who's about that life. And we've seen Steve Garcia get flatline knocked out in the UFC. We've seen Kyle Nelson get flatline knocked out in the UFC. Both these guys put themselves on the line, but both of them are arguably showing their career best form to date right now in the UFC. So that's why I want to give a shout out to them. Look at their records as well. 16-5-1 for Kyle Nelson, 16-5 for Steve Garcia. There's a lot of similarities here. There's a lot of things that you got to, appreciate about these guys. And let's pull up this matchup on Tapology, right? And let's take a specific look at this fact. We got a 33-year-old in Kyle Nelson taking on a 32-year-old in Steve Garcia. Very similar. We've got 5'11", 71-inch reach for Kyle Nelson, and we've got a 6-foot-tall, 73-inch reach for Steve Garcia. So both of these guys are, coming in here, pretty similar frame, pretty similar age, pretty similar amount of momentum. 3-1-1 for a guy like Kyle Nelson, 4-1 for Steve Garcia. I got to just say this, though, because I have a distinct memory of Steve Garcia almost getting knocked out by Charlie Ontiveros, not once, but twice, guys. And he knocked out Charlie Ontiveros in the second round with ground and pound. But when I tell you that was the sweat of all sweats, and he was a massive favorite, that is some true shit, right? Like, he was like minus 300, I believe, to win the fight. And he was having a very rough go of it. You see a guy like Steve Garcia can get hit, he can get clipped, he can get hurt, but he's also a guy that's tough as shit. You got to kill him or he's going to keep coming forward and keep trying to fight. And I think that when you look at a guy like Kyle Nelson, the problem for Kyle isn't normally that he's not durable, that he can't take a shot. The problem for him typically is that he slows down over the course of the fight. He gets tired progressively over the course of 15 minutes. So that's why he's a front-loaded finisher. When he goes out there and wins, more often than not, he's getting somebody on the chin. 6 wins by knockout, 4 wins via submission, going out there and getting the finish in 10 of his 16 professional wins. 6 wins via decision, 2 of them coming in the UFC. And when you look at those fights, it was Fernando Padilla and it was Blake Bilder. And I think that those guys are a little bit more, willing to have these slower paced fights. Obviously, they can go out there and finish themselves. They can go out there and have those moments. But you look at a guy, like Blake Bilder, and just scanning his record, he's had 5 fights go the distance. So not super surprising to see that he went the distance there. The Fernando Padilla fight as well. Padilla has lost most of the time via decision. So he's not a guy that's ever been put away. He's not been finished, but he has lost 5 fights. So you look at, Kyle Nelson, he kind of just fit the pattern there with a guy like Padilla. I think that this is a fight where I look at Kyle Nelson as a guy that's, overachieved a little bit, right, in terms of his results, because these decisions have been very close with fighters that I don't quite rate as high as Steve. And then I also think that when I'm looking at the Algeo performance, I thought that that was a bit of an early stoppage. And when I'm thinking about how that could play out here, I'm saying, okay, Steve is a guy that's unlikely to get away. He's unlikely to be put away easily, right? He's willing to die on his shield. He's willing to go out there and throw down. And I think that his cardio is solid, right? I think his willingness to mix it up in the grappling can be very effective. We saw Steve Garcia. If you guys haven't gone and watched this fight, go back and rewatch the Mel Costa fight, guys. He had Mel Costa essentially like unconscious from a rear naked choke. Like he was trying to choke the guy out and then just started elbowing his carcass, man. It was violent. This guy, Steve Garcia, is very dangerous, right? And I think that when you look at how Kyle Nelson has slowed down at times in the past, that could be the big danger here, is if Steve is able to get ahead of him on cardio, is if Steve's able to make him work a lot in the early going. I don't think it's going to fare well for Kyle Nelson down the stretch. So for me, I want to just say, I think that this is a fight that should be fun. I think it's a fight that more often than not is probably going to be over in the first 2 rounds. But if they see all 3, it's probably going to be a fight of the night candidate. I think I'm done, waiting for Steve Garcia to fail because he's getting better, man. And he seems like a very, down-to-earth guy, a guy who kind of understands where his bread is buttered. He got knocked out by Mahashate back in 2022, and since then he beat Chase Hooper, who's been having his own little career resurgence at 155 pounds. He beat Shayilan Nurdenbeki. He showed his toughness, his heart, his willingness to take damage and come back in that fight. The Mel Costa fight, he went out there and showed off the ability to work on the ground, the ability to work off the feet. And then the Sung Woo Choi fight, that was a nasty knockout. That was a great showing by him as well. And Sung Woo Choi is a guy that he struggled in terms of his chin, but he's got power and he had been working with a great gym. He had been putting in the right time. I thought he had taken the requisite time off and then he got, clipped in that fight. So I think that this is a good fight though. Should be fun. And I'm just excited to see 2 guys that have been putting in the sweat equity with the company, get a little bit of that step up, a little bit of that opportunity.